James Harper woke up at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of a garbage truck grinding its way through the Riverside Shopping Center parking lot. The hydraulic whine of the compactor was loud enough to rattle the windows of his 2004 Honda Civic, and for a disorienting moment, that terrible space between sleep and waking, he thought he was back in the convoy. Thought that sound was an engine dying. Thought the smell of rotting food from the dumpster 20 feet away was burning fuel and copper-scent blood. Then his eyes opened and he remembered. Not Afghanistan, California. Riverside Shopping Center. Behind the loading docks where the security guards didn't patrol and the cameras didn't reach. Home. Please take a minute to like, comment, and subscribe. We post at least 3 times a week to share tales of true worth. He'd been living in his car for 8 months. Doc sat up slowly, his back screaming in protest. Sleeping in a reclined driver's seat did things to your spine that no amount of stretching could fix. He was 34 years old and his body felt 50. His neck cracked when he turned it. His shoulders were perpetually knotted. His lower back sent sharp pains down his left leg every time he moved wrong. But his hands were steady. That's what mattered. A medic with shaky hands was useless. The inside of the car was organized with military precision. Everything in its place, everything accessible. His clothes were folded in a cardboard box in the trunk. 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, 1 pair of cargo pants, underwear and socks in a Ziploc bag to keep them dry. His toiletries lived in a plastic bin wedged behind the passenger seat. Toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, razor, shaving cream, soap in a travel case. Water bottles lined the floor of the back seat, 12 of them, refilled daily at the rec center water fountain. A thin blanket, army surplus, folded on the passenger seat. A pillow that had lost most of its stuffing. And under the passenger seat, wrapped in a trash bag to protect it from moisture, his old medic bag. Doc tried not to look at it, tried to pretend it wasn't there. But every morning, when he reached for his toiletries, his hand would brush against it. The canvas was worn soft from years of use. The red cross on the side had faded to pink. Inside were supplies he'd accumulated over a decade. Trauma shears, hemostatic gauze, tourniquets, chest seals, pressure bandages, an old stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff that probably didn't calibrate correctly anymore, and an expired EpiPen he couldn't bring himself to throw away. He kept telling himself he'd get rid of it, donate it, throw it in the dumpster, stop carrying around reminders of who he used to be, but he never did. Doc opened the car door and stepped out into the cool morning air. December in Southern California meant temperatures in the 50s, which was cold when you were sleeping in a car, but manageable. He'd spent winters in worse places. Afghanistan got down to freezing at night in the mountains. At least here, he didn't have to worry about frostbite. The shopping center was empty at this hour, except for the delivery trucks servicing the grocery store. Doc knew their schedules by heart now. Grocery delivery at 6:30, bread truck at 7, produce at 7:30. The drivers knew him by sight, but never acknowledged him. He was part of the landscape, another invisible homeless person trying not to be seen. He did his morning routine the same way every day. Routine was important. Structure, discipline. It's what kept him from sliding further down the slope he was already on. First, vehicle check. He popped the hood and checked the oil level. Still good. Changed it himself 3 weeks ago at the auto parts store parking lot. Checked the coolant. Needed to add some, made a mental note. Checked the battery terminals. Clean. No corrosion. Checked the tire pressure by eye. All 4 looked good. Old habit from convoy duty in Afghanistan. Never let your vehicle become a liability. Never get stranded. Second, physical training. He dropped to the asphalt beside his car and started push-ups. His breath came out in white clouds in the cold air. 1, 2, 3. His shoulders burned. His chest ached, but he kept going. 10, 20, 30. The burn in his muscles was good. It meant he was still alive, still functional. 40, 45, 50. He stood up, shook out his arms, and started sit-ups. The asphalt was cold and rough against his back. 1, 2, 3. His abdominal muscles cramped. He pushed through it. 20, 30, 40, 50. When he finished, he was breathing hard and sweating despite the cold. He grabbed a water bottle from the car and drank half of it in long gulps. Then he stripped off his shirt, the one he'd slept in, and used the other half to wash himself as best he could. The water was ice cold against his skin. He scrubbed his armpits, his chest, his face, his neck. Field shower. Another army habit that wouldn't die. He dried off with the shirt, threw it in the dirty laundry bag in the trunk, and pulled on a clean one. Then he grabbed his toiletries bin and walked across the empty parking lot toward the rec center. The Riverside Community Recreation Center sat on 3 acres at the edge of the shopping center property. It had been built in the 90s with county funds, and looked it. Beige stucco walls, flat roof. Small windows to keep the air conditioning costs down, but it had basketball courts, a weight room, a community pool, closed for the season, and most importantly for Doc, bathrooms that opened at 7 a.m. He waited outside the front doors, sitting on a bench, watching the sun come up over the target across the street. The sky went from black to purple to orange. He'd always liked this time of day, the quiet before the world woke up. In Afghanistan, dawn had been the most dangerous time. That's when the Taliban liked to attack. But here, dawn just meant the start of another day. At exactly 7 a.m., a maintenance worker unlocked the front doors from inside. Doc waited 5 minutes, didn't want to seem too eager, too desperate, then went in. The rec center smelled like chlorine and floor wax and old basketballs. Doc made his way to the men's bathroom and locked himself in a stall. He brushed his teeth, shaved carefully in the small mirror, washed his face and hands with soap, combed his hair, changed into his better pair of jeans. When he emerged, he looked almost presentable. Not homeless, just a guy. Nobody looked twice. He filled his water bottles at the fountain, then went back outside to his bench. From here, he could see through the windows into the main gymnasium. The morning pickup basketball games would start in about 30 minutes. He liked watching them. The sound of squeaking shoes on hardwood, the rhythm of the ball bouncing, the uncomplicated joy of kids playing a game. It reminded him of before the war, before everything went to hell. Doc pulled out his small first aid kit, the one he carried in his jacket pocket, and did inventory. Medic habit. 4 Band-Aids, used 2 yesterday on a kid who'd scraped his knee skateboarding. 1 roll of gauze, 1 roll of medical tape, a travel pack of alcohol wipes. A small tube of antibiotic ointment. Not much, but enough to help with minor injuries. Other homeless people in the area knew he had medical supplies, would come to him with cuts, burns, infections. He'd help them quietly, never made a big deal of it, just did what needed to be done and sent them on their way. "Morning, Doc." He looked up. Miguel Santos stood in front of him, gym bag over his shoulder, basketball under his arm. 16 years old, tall and lanky, still growing into his frame. He had his father's eyes, dark and serious, but his smile was all his own. "Morning, Miguel," Doc said. "You do your push-ups already?" "Every morning." "Man, I don't know how you do that. It's like 50 degrees out here." 50 degrees is warm. Try doing PT in the desert when it's 120. Miguel sat down on the bench beside him. "You really did that? In Afghanistan?" "Every day for 3 years." "That's crazy." Miguel pulled a protein bar out of his bag and handed it to Doc. "My dad bought a whole box of these and then decided he doesn't like the flavor. You want it?" Doc wanted to refuse, wanted to say he didn't need charity, but his stomach was empty and the bar was chocolate peanut butter, and he was tired of being too proud to accept help. "Thanks," he said, taking it. Miguel pulled out a second bar for himself, and they ate in comfortable silence, watching through the windows as other kids started arriving for the morning games. Doc noticed the way Miguel's eyes tracked the ball, the way his leg bounced with anticipation. Kid was itching to play. "You playing today?" Doc asked. "Yeah, we got a tournament coming up next weekend. Coach wants us practicing every day." "You any good?" Miguel grinned. "I'm all right. Not going to the NBA or anything, but I can hold my own." "What position?" "Power forward. I like playing in the paint. Physical game, you know?" Doc nodded, but something tightened in his chest. Physical game. That meant contact. That meant taking hits, especially to the chest going up for rebounds. "You protect yourself?" Doc asked. "When you're going for rebounds?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you keep your hands up? Protect your chest." Miguel laughed. "Doc, it's basketball, not boxing. I'm not going to get hurt." Doc wanted to say more, wanted to explain that chest impacts could be dangerous, that hitting the sternum at exactly the wrong millisecond of the cardiac cycle could stop a heart, that he'd seen it happen, that a kid named Jenkins had died in his arms because of bad timing and worse luck. But he didn't say any of that, because what was a homeless guy going to tell a high school athlete about safety? And what were the odds, really? Commotio cordis was incredibly rare. Jenkins had been a freak accident. Miguel would be fine. Just be careful, Doc said instead. Always am. Miguel stood up, hefted his ball. You going to watch? Maybe. Through the window. You should come inside. It's warmer. Too crowded. Miguel didn't push. He'd learned over the last few weeks that Doc didn't like crowds, didn't like noise, didn't like being in enclosed spaces with too many people. Well, if you change your mind, Miguel headed for the doors, then paused and looked back. Hey, Doc, thanks for the advice about protecting myself. I'll keep my hands up. Doc nodded, watched Miguel disappear inside. He told himself the tightness in his chest was nothing, just paranoia. Just his broken brain seeing danger where there wasn't any. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. Over the next 3 weeks, Doc and Miguel fell into a rhythm. Miguel would arrive at the rec center around 7:30 a.m. for morning practice. He'd stop by Doc's bench, share whatever food he'd brought, and they'd talk for 10 or 15 minutes before Miguel went inside to play. Doc learned that Miguel's mother had died 4 years ago. Cancer. Aggressive and fast. She'd been gone 6 months after diagnosis. Miguel had been 12 years old. His father, Dr. Robert Santos, was an ER physician at County General, worked 60-hour weeks, overnight shifts, double shifts. He was good at his job, Miguel said it with pride, but it meant Miguel basically raised himself, got himself up for school, made his own meals, did his own homework. His dad tried, Miguel said, he really did. But saving other people's lives didn't leave much time for being a parent. Doc understood that better than Miguel knew. He'd been a medic. His job had been saving lives too. And it consumed everything. Left no room for anything else. No room for relationships or hobbies or the simple pleasure of not being responsible for whether someone lived or died. Miguel also learned things about Doc, though Doc was careful about what he shared. Miguel knew Doc had been in the army, that he'd been a medic, that he'd served 3 deployments in Afghanistan, that he'd gotten out in 2015, and things had not gone well after that. But Miguel didn't know about the nightmares, didn't know about the panic attacks, didn't know that Doc couldn't watch fireworks on the 4th of July because the sounds sent him straight back to Kandahar, didn't know that the smell of diesel fuel made him nauseous, didn't know that sometimes when things got too loud or too chaotic, Doc's brain simply left his body and went somewhere else, somewhere terrible, and he couldn't control it. One morning, 3 weeks after they'd started talking regularly, Miguel asked the question Doc had been dreading. Doc, why do you live in your car? They were sitting on the bench, sharing a breakfast burrito Miguel had brought from the food truck that parked outside the shopping center. The burrito was good, eggs and chorizo and cheese wrapped in a flour tortilla that was still warm. Doc ate slowly, savoring every bite, because he didn't know when his next hot meal would be. I lost my job, Doc said finally. Lost my apartment. Things snowball after that. What kind of job did you have? I was an EMT for a while, after I got out of the army. That makes sense. You were a medic, so EMT work would be similar. Yeah. So what happened? Why did you lose the job? Doc took another bite of burrito, chewed slowly, swallowed, trying to decide how much to say. I couldn't handle it, he said finally. The stress, the emergencies. I thought I could, but I couldn't. Why not? Because every time we got a call, every time I showed up to someone having a heart attack or a car accident or a trauma, all I could see were the people I couldn't save. All I could hear were the sounds from Afghanistan. And I'd freeze, just completely lock up. Can't be an EMT if you freeze in emergencies. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Then, that sounds really scary. It is. Do you still see those things? The people you couldn't save? Doc nodded. Every day. But you still do the push-ups every morning. Still keep everything organized in your car. Still help people when they get hurt. Routine helps. Structure. Discipline. That's what keeps me from completely falling apart. Miguel thought about this, his teenage brain trying to process trauma he'd never experienced. My dad says that after my mom died, the only thing that kept him going was routine. Going to work, coming home, making dinner, even though neither of us wanted to eat. He said if he stopped moving, he'd never start again. Your dad sounds smart. He is. He's a really good doctor, saves people all the time. Miguel paused. You were a good medic, weren't you? Doc's throat tightened. I tried to be. How many people did you save in Afghanistan? 23 confirmed. Probably more that I didn't follow up on. Miguel's eyes went wide. 23? Doc, that's amazing. It wasn't enough. What do you mean? Doc didn't answer, because how could he explain that 23 successes meant nothing when weighed against the one failure that mattered? How could he explain that PFC Aaron Jenkins, 19 years old, kid from Ohio, who wanted to be a teacher when he got out, haunted him more than all the people he'd saved combined? They finished eating in silence. Miguel gathered up the wrapper and threw it in the nearby trash can. He picked up his basketball, ready to head inside, then hesitated. Doc, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever think about going back to medical stuff? Doc laughed, bitter and sharp. Every day. So why don't you? Because I'm broken, Miguel. I see things that aren't there, hear things. When it gets loud, when there's chaos, my brain goes somewhere else, somewhere I can't control. Can't be a medic if you can't control your own brain. Miguel nodded slowly, processing this. That sounds lonely. It was such a simple observation, but it hit Doc like a physical blow, because it was true. He was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely, surrounded by people every day, but completely isolated. Yeah, Doc said quietly. It is. Miguel shifted his basketball from one hand to the other. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Even if you can't do medical stuff anymore. You're still you, you know? And that matters. Before Doc could respond, Miguel headed inside. But Doc sat on that bench for a long time afterward, turning Miguel's words over in his mind. You're still you. The problem was, Doc didn't know who that was anymore. That afternoon, while Miguel's team practiced inside, Doc sat on his bench and let the memories come. He usually fought them, pushed them down, kept himself busy with routines and structure, so there was no space for remembering. But today he let them surface. Afghanistan, 2014, summer, Kandahar province. James Harper was 24 years old and on his third deployment. Most medics only did 1 or 2, but Doc kept volunteering to go back. His family thought he was crazy. His girlfriend at the time had broken up with him over it. His buddies from high school couldn't understand why he'd risk his life over and over when he could have taken a safe assignment stateside. But Doc had never felt more himself than when he was deployed. Never felt more useful, more necessary, more alive. His job was simple: keep soldiers alive long enough to get them to a field hospital. That meant working in conditions that would make civilian EMTs quit on the spot. No sterile environment, no backup, no do-overs, just Doc and his training and a medic bag full of supplies that never seemed like enough. Gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, IED blasts that turned human bodies into things that didn't look human anymore. Burns from vehicle fires, traumatic amputations, collapsed lungs, arterial bleeds that turned the desert sand red in seconds. Doc had seen it all, done it all, saved 23 soldiers by working faster, thinking clearer, and refusing to give up even when it seemed hopeless. His commanding officer said Doc had hands blessed by God. His patients said he was a miracle worker. The guys in his unit called him Doc, with the kind of respect usually reserved for much higher ranks. But Doc didn't feel like a miracle worker. He felt like someone desperately trying to hold back the tide. The day Jenkins died, Doc had known something was wrong from the moment the convoy left base. It was supposed to be a simple supply run. Resupply Forward Operating Base Phoenix with food, water, ammunition. 20-minute drive along a route they'd traveled dozens of times. Should have been routine. But Doc's instincts, honed by 3 deployments and hundreds of patrols, were screaming at him. The road was too quiet. No locals, no vehicles, no kids playing. Just empty desert and the sound of their engines. He'd keyed his radio. Anyone else feel like this is wrong? The truck commander had laughed. Doc, everything here is wrong. That's why we get combat pay. 5 minutes later, the IED went off. The lead vehicle hit it. A buried explosive charge that lifted the Humvee 3 feet off the ground and tore through the undercarriage like paper. The blast was deafening. Doc's vehicle swerved to avoid the crater, nearly rolled, recovered. Then the small arms fire started. Ambush. Classic Taliban tactic. disable the lead vehicle with an IED. Then attack the convoy while they're disorganized and stopping to help casualties. Doc was out of his vehicle before it fully stopped, medic bag in hand, running toward the damaged Humvee while bullets kicked up sand around his feet. His training overrode his fear. His brain went into combat mode, hyper-focused, calculating, aware of everything. 3 casualties in the lead vehicle. Driver was dead. Doc knew it the second he saw the body, knew there was nothing he could do. Gunner had shrapnel wounds to the legs and abdomen. TC had a concussion and possible internal injuries. Doc triaged fast. Gunner first, TC second, driver already gone. He worked on the gunner, PFC Marcus Stone, while the rest of the convoy returned fire. Applied tourniquets to both legs, packed the abdominal wound with hemostatic gauze, started an IV line. Stone was screaming, which meant he was alive, which meant Doc was winning. Then he heard the call over the radio. Man down, we need Doc at Vehicle 3. Doc left Stone with another soldier who had basic first aid training and ran. Vehicle 3 had taken RPG fire, rocket-propelled grenade that missed the engine block but exploded close enough to send shrapnel through the thin armor. 2 casualties. One was already dead. Doc could see that from 10 feet away. The other was PFC Aaron Jenkins. Jenkins was 29 years old, looked younger, babyface. Talked about his girlfriend Emily constantly, showed everyone pictures of her at every opportunity. Wanted to be a high school history teacher when he got out. Had already been accepted to Ohio State on the GI Bill. He was sitting against the wheel of the Humvee, conscious, looking confused. Doc, his voice was weak. I think I got hit. Doc dropped to his knees beside him, already assessing. Jenkins had taken shrapnel to the abdomen, not immediately life-threatening if Doc could control the bleeding. A piece of metal protruding from his left shoulder, also survivable. Some minor cuts on his face and arms. You're okay, Doc said, his voice calm and certain, even though his hands were moving fast. You're going to be fine. I've got you. He cut away Jenkins's uniform shirt, packed the abdominal wound, applied pressure, started an IV, gave morphine for the pain. Jenkins's vitals were stable, pulse strong, blood pressure good, breathing normal. Doc was winning. Jenkins was going to make it. Then the second explosion hit. Secondary IED, buried 20 feet from the first one. Designed to kill the rescuers who stopped to help after the initial blast. The explosion was smaller than the first, but close. So close that Doc felt the heat on his face, felt the shockwave lift him off the ground and slam him back down. When his vision cleared, Jenkins was looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. Doc, I can't breathe. Doc checked his airway, clear. Checked his chest, no obvious wounds. Your airway's fine, you're just shook up. Breathe slow, in through your nose, out through your mouth. But Jenkins' breathing was getting worse, faster, shallower, and his color was wrong, lips turning blue. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Doc's training kicked in immediately. Check for pulse. Nothing. Start CPR. He positioned his hands over Jenkins' sternum and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Counting in his head. 30 compressions, then 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Come on, Jenkins, come on. The medic from Vehicle 4 arrived with the AED, automated external defibrillator. They applied the pads, analyzed, shock advised. They shocked him. Nothing. More CPR, more shocks. Doc worked on Jenkins for 18 minutes while the firefight continued around them. 18 minutes of compressions and rescue breaths and shocks and checking for a pulse that never came back. When the medevac helicopter finally arrived, the flight medic took one look at Jenkins and shook his head. Doc, he's gone. You did everything you could. But Doc couldn't accept it, wouldn't accept it. Jenkins had been fine. His wounds had been manageable. Doc had controlled the bleeding, had started an IV, had done everything right. So why was he dead? Later at the field hospital, the surgeon had explained it to him. Commotio cordis, the surgeon said. Blunt impact to the chest at precisely the wrong moment of the cardiac cycle, specifically during the upstroke of the T-wave, which lasts about 10 to 30 milliseconds. If you get hit right then, it causes ventricular fibrillation. The heart's electrical system goes haywire. It's incredibly rare, but when it happens, it's almost always fatal. The secondary explosion, Doc said numbly. The shockwave hit his chest. Probably, or shrapnel, or debris. Something hit him hard enough and at exactly the wrong millisecond, and his heart just stopped. I did CPR. I shocked him. I did everything right. You did, but commotio cordis needs immediate defibrillation, within the first 3 minutes, for any chance of survival. By the time you realized what was happening, it was already too late. Doc had nodded, had thanked the surgeon for explaining, had gone back to his quarters and sat on his bunk, staring at nothing. He'd saved 23 soldiers, but he'd lost Jenkins, and somehow that one loss weighed more than all the successes combined. Present day, the rec center parking lot. Doc opened his eyes and realized he'd been sitting on the bench for over an hour, lost in memories. The sun was higher now. The parking lot was filling with cars, parents dropping off kids for afternoon programs. His hands were shaking. He pulled his medication from his pocket, anti-anxiety pills prescribed by the VA, and dry-swallowed one. Waited for the chemical calm to settle over him like a blanket. Miguel came out of the rec center, sweaty from practice, and plopped down on the bench beside him. You okay, Doc? You look, I don't know, sad. Doc forced a smile. Just thinking. About Afghanistan? Yeah. Must have been really hard, being over there. It was. Miguel pulled a water bottle from his bag and offered it to Doc. Doc took it, grateful. They sat in silence for a while, watching cars come and go. Finally, Miguel said, Doc, if you could go back and do medical stuff again, like if your PTSD wasn't a problem, would you? Doc thought about that, really thought about it. Yeah, he said finally, I would. Because even with everything that happened, even with Jenkins, even with the nightmares and the panic attacks, those 23 soldiers went home to their families because of me. And that meant something. That means something. Miguel nodded. My dad says the same thing. Says that even when he loses patience, he still shows up the next day. Because the ones he saves make it worth it. Your dad's a smart man. He is. Miguel stood up, stretched. Tournaments this Saturday. You should come watch. Not inside. I know that's hard for you. But you could watch through the windows. It's going to be a good game. Maybe. Cool. Miguel headed toward his dad's car, which had just pulled into the parking lot. Then he turned back. And Doc, thanks for talking to me, for being, I don't know, for being here. Doc watched him go, feeling something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose, or just the simple pleasure of mattering to someone. Saturday afternoon arrived with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-60s. Perfect weather. Doc sat on his bench outside the rec center, watching as parents and kids streamed through the doors for the youth basketball tournament. The parking lot was packed, cars everywhere, people everywhere. The noise level was already high, kids shouting, parents talking, music playing from someone's car stereo. Doc's chest was tight just from sitting outside. The thought of going in there into all that chaos made his hands start to shake. He stayed on his bench. Miguel had come out 20 minutes earlier to say hi before the game started. He'd been nervous, bouncing on his toes, talking fast, hands fidgeting with his jersey. Scouts are going to be here, Miguel had said. From the high school team. If I play well, I might make varsity next year. You'll do great, Doc had told him. You think so? I know so. You're good, Miguel. Trust yourself. Miguel had grinned, then run back inside. Doc had watched him go, feeling that familiar tightness in his chest, the worry that wouldn't go away. Protect your chest. Keep your hands up. Don't take unnecessary hits. But Miguel was 16 and playing for scouts, and he wouldn't hold back. Doc knew that. Miguel would play hard, take contact, go for every rebound. That's what made him good. Doc tried to convince himself he was being paranoid. Commotio cordis was incredibly rare. The odds of it happening to Miguel were astronomical, but he'd seen astronomical odds come true before. The game started at 2 p.m. Doc could see through the windows. The gym was packed, maybe 200 people in the stands. The sound of the buzzer starting the game was muffled but audible from outside. Doc watched Miguel on the court, watched him move, watched him play defense. First quarter went fine. Miguel scored 6 points, got 2 rebounds, no problems. Second quarter started. Miguel's team was down by 4. The pace of the game picked up, more physical, more aggressive. Doc's chest got tighter. At the 8-minute mark of the second quarter, Miguel drove to the basket. A defender stepped in front of him. A big kid, looked like he was 6'2", maybe 190 pounds. Miguel couldn't stop in time, couldn't avoid the collision. The impact happened in slow motion from Doc's perspective. Miguel's chest, center of the sternum, right over his heart, hit the defender's shoulder. Direct impact, solid contact. The kind of hit that would knock the wind out of you, but shouldn't cause serious injury. Miguel stumbled backward, took 2 steps. Then his face went confused, like he couldn't understand what was happening to his body. Then he collapsed. For one horrible second, nobody reacted. Everyone thought he'd just fallen, or gotten the wind knocked out, or was being dramatic. Then someone screamed, "He's not breathing." The gym erupted into chaos. Doc's brain went to 3 places at once. Part of him was in the rec center parking lot, watching through the window as people rushed onto the basketball court. Part of him was in Afghanistan, in the convoy, watching Jenkins collapse. And part of him was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and loud and terrifying, where nothing made sense and everything was happening too fast. Not again. Not again. Not another kid. Not Miguel. His vision tunneled. His hearing went muffled, like he was underwater. His hands started shaking so badly, he had to press them against his thighs to make them stop. His chest felt like someone was sitting on it. His heart hammered at 140 beats per minute. Sweat poured down his back despite the cool air. Panic attack. Full-blown, out-of-control panic attack. He tried to use the techniques the VA therapist had taught him. Tried to breathe slowly. Tried to ground himself. 5 things you can see. 4 things you can touch. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. But all he could see was Miguel on the floor. All he could hear was screaming. All he could smell was cordite and burning fuel that weren't really there. I can't go in there. I can't. Too many people. Too much noise. I'll freeze. I'll make it worse. I'm broken. I'm useless. I'm... Through the window. He saw a woman push through the crowd and drop to her knees beside Miguel. She was wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt. Off-duty paramedic or EMT, maybe, judging by how confidently she moved. She checked for a pulse, tilted Miguel's head back to open the airway, started chest compressions. But something was wrong. Doc could see it even from 50 feet away through a window. Could see it in the woman's rhythm, in her positioning, in the way she was treating this. She was doing standard CPR, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The protocol for cardiac arrest from any normal cause, heart attack, drowning, choking. But Miguel didn't have a normal cardiac arrest. Miguel had commotio cordis. Doc knew it in his bones, knew it the same way he'd known Jenkins was dying before anyone else did. Direct impact to the chest, immediate collapse, no obvious airway obstruction. Classic presentation. And standard CPR wouldn't work. Compressions alone wouldn't restart a heart in ventricular fibrillation. Miguel needed defibrillation, needed an AED, needed it now. But the woman didn't know that. She was doing CPR, wasting precious seconds. And every second meant Miguel's brain was without oxygen. Every second meant more damage. Doc looked at the door to the rec center, at all those people, at all that chaos. His body screamed at him to run, to get away, to protect himself. But his training, that deep, bone-level training that had kept him alive through 3 deployments, screamed louder. That's a kid dying in there, a kid you know, a kid who brought you breakfast burritos and water and treated you like you mattered. Are you really going to let him die because you're scared? Are you really going to let another Jenkins happen when you can stop it? Doc's hands stopped shaking. His vision cleared. He stood up and ran toward the door. A noise hit him like a physical wall the second he pushed through the doors. 200 people screaming, crying, shouting. Parents yelling for someone to call 911. Kids sobbing. Coaches trying to maintain order. The PA system crackling with someone trying to make an announcement that nobody was listening to. Doc's PTSD went nuclear. His brain started pulling him back to Kandahar, started overlaying explosions and gunfire onto the gymnasium. Started turning screaming parents into wounded soldiers. But he pushed through it, pushed through the panic and the flashbacks and the terror, because Miguel was on the floor, and Miguel was dying, and Doc was the only person in this building who knew what to do. He shoved through the crowd. People tried to stop him. "Sir, please stay back, give them room." But he ignored them, kept moving. His entire world had narrowed to one point: Miguel. He dropped to his knees beside the woman doing CPR. She looked up, startled. "Who the hell are you?" Doc didn't answer. He was already assessing. Miguel's lips were blue, pupils fixed and dilated. No pulse at the carotid artery, not breathing. He put his hand on Miguel's chest, right over the impact site, and felt for the telltale bruising. There, forming already, a red mark that would turn purple-black in the next few hours if Miguel survived. "Where's the AED?" Doc demanded. "Someone went to get it. Now. I need it now." Something in his voice, command voice, combat medic voice, the voice that had ordered soldiers around under fire, made her stop arguing. "Someone get the AED!" she screamed. Doc was vaguely aware of other people around him. A man in his 40s, Hispanic, well-dressed, pushing through the crowd. Miguel's father, Dr. Robert Santos. Dr. Santos dropped to his knees on Miguel's other side. "What happened? What's wrong with him?" "Commotio cordis," Doc said, his hands still on Miguel's chest, checking for any sign of a pulse. Nothing. Direct impact to the sternum during the vulnerable phase of the cardiac cycle. "He's in VFib. Needs immediate defibrillation." Dr. Santos stared at him. "How do you—" Someone arrived with the AED, a bright yellow case with a big red cross on it. Their hands were shaking so badly they almost dropped it. Doc grabbed it, tore it open, pulled out the pads. His hands were steady now. Pure muscle memory. He'd used AEDs dozens of times. In Afghanistan, as an EMT, in training scenarios. His body knew what to do even when his brain was screaming. He ripped open Miguel's jersey, buttons scattering across the gym floor, placed the pads with precision, one on the right chest below the collarbone, one on the left chest below the nipple. "Everyone back," Doc said. His voice carried across the gym, cutting through the chaos. "Clear," the AED analyzed. The mechanical voice seemed impossibly loud. "Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient." Then, "Shock advised. Stand clear." Doc looked at the faces around him. The EMT woman, stunned into silence. Dr. Santos, tears streaming down his face. The other kids, frozen in horror. He pressed the shock button. Miguel's body convulsed. Every muscle contracted at once, lifting him slightly off the floor, then dropping him back down. Doc checked for a pulse. Nothing. "Analyzing heart rhythm," the AED said. "Do not touch the patient. Shock advised. Stand clear." Doc pressed the button again. Another shock. Another convulsion. Still no pulse. The EMT woman started to move toward Miguel. "We need to do compressions." "No," Doc said sharply. "Commotio cordis doesn't respond to compressions alone. He needs defibrillation. Multiple shocks. The heart's electrical system is completely scrambled. We have to shock it back into rhythm." Dr. Santos looked at Doc with sudden recognition. "You're a medic." "Was." "Where did you serve?" "Afghanistan. 3 tours. I've seen this before." Understanding flashed across Dr. Santos's face. "Then, do it. Whatever you think is right." Analyzing heart rhythm. The AED paused. Then, "Shock advised. Stand clear." Third shock. This time, when Miguel's body convulsed, Doc saw something different. A slight change in color. A flutter of movement. He checked for a pulse. There. Faint, but there. 40 beats per minute. Irregular, but beating. Miguel gasped. A horrible choking sound. Then he coughed. Then his eyes opened. Confused, terrified. Not understanding where he was or what had happened. The gym erupted in cheers and crying and applause. But Doc barely heard it. Because the adrenaline was crashing. The PTSD was crashing. Everything was crashing. His hands started shaking again. His vision grayed at the edges. His chest felt like it was being crushed. His ears were ringing. The gym was too loud, too bright, too much. He stumbled to his feet and ran. Doc made it about 50 feet outside before his legs gave out. He collapsed beside his car, gasping for air that wouldn't come, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. The parking lot spun around him. The sky pressed down on him. The ground felt like it was tilting. Can't breathe. Dying. I'm dying. Heart attack. This is a heart attack. Not again. Not again. Please, not again. His hands fumbled in his pocket for his medication bottle. His fingers wouldn't work right. Everything was shaking. He finally got the bottle open but dropped it. Pills scattered across the asphalt. Someone knelt beside him, picked up a pill, handed it to him. Doc looked up. Dr. Robert Santos. Panic attack? Dr. Santos asked quietly. Doc nodded, unable to speak, and put the pill under his tongue. It would dissolve faster that way, get into his system faster, make this stop faster. Dr. Santos didn't say anything, just sat down beside Doc on the asphalt, back against the Honda Civic, and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Slowly the medication started to work. Doc's breathing slowed. His heart rate dropped from 160 to 140 to 120 to 100. His vision cleared. The world stopped spinning. He sat there, exhausted and shaking and humiliated, while Dr. Santos just waited patiently beside him. "I'm sorry," Doc finally said. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have run out like that." "You saved my son's life," Dr. Santos said. "You can run wherever you want." "The paramedics, they're with him?" "They arrived 2 minutes after you left. He's conscious, talking. They're taking him to County General for observation, but he's going to be okay. Because of you." Doc closed his eyes. The relief was overwhelming. "Good. That's good. How did you know?" "That it was commotio cordis. Sarah, the woman doing CPR, she's been an EMT for 8 years and she didn't recognize it." "Because I've seen it before." Doc's voice was hollow. "In Afghanistan, a soldier in my unit took a hit to the chest during an ambush. I didn't know what it was then. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. He died." Dr. Santos absorbed this. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was." Doc opened his eyes and looked at the doctor. "But Miguel's alive, so maybe it wasn't completely pointless. What happened to Jenkins? Maybe it taught me something that saved someone else." They sat in silence for another minute. Then Dr. Santos said, "The paramedic who came with Miguel, Tommy Reynolds, he recognized you. Said you went through EMT training together. Said you were one of the best medics he'd ever worked with." Doc laughed bitterly. "He say anything else?" "He said you had some kind of breakdown, lost your certification. Dropped out of sight." Dr. Santos glanced at Doc's car, at the obvious signs that someone was living in it. "And ended up here." "Yeah." "PTSD?" "Yeah." "Are you getting treatment?" "VA gives me meds. Used to do therapy, but I stopped going." "Why?" "Because sitting in a circle talking about feelings doesn't change the fact that I see dead people when things get loud. Doesn't change the fact that I freeze in emergencies." Doc gestured at the rec center. "Or at least I used to. I don't know what happened in there. I should have frozen. I should have had a complete breakdown. But I just did it. Did the job, saved Miguel. And then you had the breakdown after." "Yeah." Dr. Santos was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That's actually progress. Classic PTSD response would be freezing during the crisis and having the breakdown during. You managed to function through the crisis and only broke down after the immediate danger passed. That's significant improvement." Doc had never thought of it that way. "Doesn't feel like improvement. I understand." "But it is." Dr. Santos shifted position, his back probably hurting from sitting on pavement. "Can I buy you dinner? A real dinner? At a restaurant?" Doc almost said no, but he was exhausted and hungry, and the thought of going back to his car to eat a protein bar was depressing. "Okay," he said. They went to a 24-hour diner 2 blocks from the rec center, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and laminate tables, and a menu that had pictures of the food. Santos ordered for both of them: burgers, fries, coffee, apple pie. Doc tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some dignity, but he was starving and the food was hot and good and he couldn't help himself. He ate like a man who hadn't had a real meal in days, which was true. Dr. Santos didn't comment, just ate his own meal and let Doc finish without judgment. When the plates were empty, Dr. Santos ordered more coffee for both of them and leaned back in the booth. "Tell me about Afghanistan," he said, "if you want to." Doc didn't want to, but something about Dr. Santos, maybe the way he'd sat beside Doc during the panic attack, without trying to fix it, maybe the way he'd looked at Doc like he was a person instead of a problem, made him talk. He told Dr. Santos about being a combat medic, about the soldiers he'd saved, about working in impossible conditions with minimal equipment, about the satisfaction of keeping someone alive when everything said they should die. He told him about Jenkins, about the convoy ambush, about doing everything right and losing him anyway, about learning what commotio cordis was from a field surgeon who couldn't save Jenkins either. He told him about coming home, about the nightmares and the flashbacks and the hypervigilance, about losing the EMT job after freezing during a cardiac arrest call, about spiraling downward into homelessness. Dr. Santos listened without interrupting. When Doc finished, he said, "You have PTSD. I know. Are you still getting treatment?" "I have meds from the VA, but I stopped going to therapy 6 months ago." "Why?" "Because it wasn't helping. I'd sit in these group sessions and everyone would talk about their triggers and their coping mechanisms and their support systems. And all I could think was that I don't have any of that. I don't have a support system. I don't have a safe place. I don't have anything except a car and a medic bag I can't bring myself to throw away." "What about Miguel? He seems like he cares about you." Doc's throat tightened. "Miguel's a good kid, but he's 16. He's not supposed to be my support system." "Fair enough." Dr. Santos drained his coffee. "So what do you need? What would help you get back on your feet?" Doc laughed. "Honestly, I don't know. A job, I guess. Somewhere to live. But I can't hold down a job. I've tried." "What if the job played to your strengths?" "What strengths?" "I'm a homeless veteran with PTSD who lives in his car." "You're a highly trained combat medic with extensive experience in emergency medicine who saved my son's life today." Dr. Santos leaned forward. "The rec center runs first aid and CPR certification classes. Lifeguards, coaches, youth volunteers, staff, they all need training. They need instructors." Doc shook his head. "I can't teach. I can barely function around people. Small classes, 10 people maximum. Structured environment. During quiet hours, when the gym's not in use. You'd be teaching them what you know, and what you know is extremely valuable." "I'd freeze. I'd have a panic attack in front of everyone." "Maybe. Or maybe you'd do exactly what you did today. You'd push through the fear because the work matters." Doc wanted to say no. Wanted to explain all the reasons it wouldn't work. Wanted to list every way he was broken and useless and damaged. But he thought about Miguel, about watching him collapse, about making the choice to go in despite the terror, about how it had felt to save him. "I'll think about it," Doc said finally. Dr. Santos nodded. "That's all I'm asking." 2 weeks later, Doc stood in a small classroom at the rec center facing 8 people who wanted to learn CPR and first aid. His hands were shaking slightly. His chest was tight. But he was there. The class was scheduled for Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m., quiet time, after the morning rush, but before the lunch program started. The rec center had agreed to pay him $200 per class. 4 classes a month meant $800. It wasn't much, but it was something. Santos had helped him find an efficiency apartment, $600 a month rent, barely 400 square feet, but it was his. He'd given Doc an envelope with first month's rent and deposit. "Payment for saving Miguel," he'd said. "Don't argue." So Doc hadn't argued. He'd taken the help, moved out of his car, slept in an actual bed for the first time in 9 months. It wasn't a cure. He still had nightmares, still had panic attacks, still struggled every single day with PTSD that wasn't going away. But it was progress. Now he stood in front of these 8 people, 3 rec center staff members, 2 parents, 2 lifeguards, and 1 high school student, and tried to remember how to teach. "My name is James Harper," he said. His voice was steadier than he expected. "Most people call me Doc. I was a combat medic in the Army for 10 years, and I worked as a civilian EMT for 2 years after that. Today, I'm going to teach you how to save someone's life." He spent the next 2 hours teaching them proper CPR technique. Chest compressions, how hard, how fast, proper hand placement, rescue breaths, how to tilt the head, how to seal the airway, when to use an AED and how to use it correctly. He told them about commotio cordis, made them understand that it was rare but real, and that the only treatment was immediate defibrillation. He made them practice on trading dummies until they got it right. And when one of the parents asked, "How do you know so much about commotio cordis?" Most CPR instructors don't even mention it. Doc told them the truth. "Because I've seen it happen twice. Once in Afghanistan, where I lost someone because I didn't know what it was. And once here, 2 weeks ago, where I saved someone because I'd learned from my mistake. That's why you're learning this. So that if the moment comes, if someone collapses, and you're the only one who can help, you'll know what to do. After class, the rec center director approached him. That was excellent, Doc. Really excellent. Would you be willing to do 2 classes a week instead of 1? Doc's first instinct was to say no, to protect himself, to not risk taking on too much. But he thought about Miguel, recovering at home, cleared to return to basketball in 6 months. He thought about Jenkins, who'd never come home. Yeah, Doc said, I can do 2. 3 months after Miguel's cardiac arrest, Doc sat on his bench outside the rec center. His bench, people had started calling it, and watched through the windows as Miguel played basketball for the first time since the incident. Miguel wore a protective chest guard under his jersey. Doctor's orders. It made him look slightly bulky, but it would absorb impact and protect his heart. Doc watched him move on the court, tentative at first, cautious, then gaining confidence, then playing like himself again, aggressive, physical, fearless. After the game, Miguel came outside and sat on the bench. Did you see that 3-pointer? Miguel asked, grinning. I saw it. You're getting better. I'm getting my confidence back. Coach says I might make varsity next year. You will. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the shopping center parking lot. Doc, Miguel said finally, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you okay now? Like actually okay? Doc thought about that question, really thought about it. He still had nightmares, still saw Jenkins sometimes, still heard explosions that weren't there, still had days where getting out of bed felt impossible. But he also had an apartment, had a job teaching first aid, had students who respected him, had started going back to VA therapy because Dr. Santos had convinced him it was worth trying again. He had Miguel, who brought him protein bars and asked if he was okay. He had purpose. I'm not cured, Doc said finally. PTSD doesn't work like that. I'm probably never going to be the person I was before Afghanistan. But I'm better. I'm fighting, and some days that's enough. Miguel nodded. My mom used to say that as long as you're fighting, you haven't lost. Your mom sounds like she was smart. She was. Miguel stood up, stretched. Thanks, Doc. For everything. For saving me. For being here. For still fighting. Doc watched him walk back to his dad's car. Dr. Santos waved from the driver's seat. Doc waved back. Then he sat on his bench as the sun disappeared below the horizon, turning the sky orange and purple and gold. He thought about Jenkins, about how that one death had nearly destroyed him, but also about how it had taught him something that saved Miguel's life. He thought about all the soldiers he'd saved in Afghanistan, 23 of them, 23 people who were alive because of him. He thought about his students, learning CPR, learning first aid, learning how to save lives. He wasn't the medic he'd been in Afghanistan. That person was gone, broken by war and loss and trauma. But he was something else now, something different. He was a teacher, a mentor, a survivor, and some days that was enough. Some days that was more than enough. Please take a minute to like, comment, and subscribe. We post at least 3 times a week to share tales of true worth.